السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وأنا ودا السلامية magacayga waxa weeyaan Nasra Suleyman waxaan maanta igu soo dhaweynayaa Somali Parent Conference of 2021 conference-kan oo aan rabno insha Allah inay waxyaalo badan ka faa'iideysataan insha Allah oo macluumaad badan oo aan maanta in soo bandhigayno insha Allah ina ka qayb qaadataan fahantaan insha Allah ka faa'iideysataan idinka iyo qoysaskiina biidnillah mahadsantihiin insha Allah waxaan noo bilaabaysaa Lydia.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Somali Parent Conference in 2021. My name is Lydia Nelson. I'm the operations coordinator at our Burnsville location. Nasser and I are just going to give a brief overview of the conference and then an introduction to Isuroon as we get started this morning.
magacayda inoo sheegtay Lydia magacaygu waxa weeyaan Nasra Suleyman waxaan ahay social worker u shaqeysa Isuroon qaybta Princeton haddana maanta waxaan la sheeganaynaa waxyaabaha oo Isuroon ay u qabato community-ga Soomaaliyeed ama community-ga in general inshallah.
All right, so this is a schedule that you're looking at of what the day will look like today. We'll have some welcoming remarks, introduction to Isuroon with myself and Nasser Suleyman, and then remarks from Fartoon Welly, who is the executive director and founder of Isuroon. We'll then have some sessions on different topics, a break for lunch and prayer, and then more topic sessions in the afternoon. You can see some of the subjects that we'll be talking about on this right box here. We'll be talking about child protection reform in Minnesota, financial literacy, parenting styles in Somali culture, drug use and youth violence. We'll have a panel on fatherhood, and then a family self-assessment, and those won't be in that order. These are just the topics that we'll cover today.
Maanta waxaan rabnaa inaan first inaan ugu soo dhaweyno parent conference-ka 2021 anigoo ah Nasra Suleyman iyo Lydia Nelson waxaan ugu xigi doontaa Fartoon Welly the founder of Isuroon insha Allah waxaa ku xigi doonaa topic session aan lahaanayna insha Allah then break iyo u qaadanayno lunchka iyo ina maaragtay waqtiga salaada la tukado iyo waxaa ku xigi doonaa sessionna markaas faa'iido badan maaragtay ka heli doontaan insha Allah marka dhinacan midigta marka aragtid waxaa ku yaala waxyaalaha maaragtay ka hadli doono insha Allah waxaa ka mid ah child protectionka reform hadaa maqashid macnaha waxa weeyaan waxyaaba laga bedelayo so child protectionka waxyaabaha maaragtay ku saabsan financial literacy qaybta dhaqaalaha ama sida maaragtay dadka ay maaragtay u dhaqaalahoodu fiicnaan doono insha Allah parenting styles and Somali culture sida caruurta loo koriyo stylada kale sida ay kala different yihiin iyo dhaqankeena insha Allah drug use and youth violence qaybta daroogada qaabilsan iyo markay caruurteenu youthkeena ama dhalinyaradu maaragtay ay dagaalamaan ama wax xun maaragtay ay sameeyaan fatherhood panel iyo waalidiinta maaragtay aabayaasha Soomaaliyeed ama Africanka topicyo ku saabsan iyo waxaa noogu dambeyn doona family assessment waxa la dhaho ama sida maaragtay waalidiintu naftooda ay u qiimeyn lahaayeen oo waxa u fiican familiyashooda u eegi lahaayeen inay sameynayaan in kale.
All right, so now we'll move on to a brief introduction to Isuroon and to the programs that we have here.
haddana waxaan u gudbaynaa Isuroon iyo waxyaalaha aan programska aan ka shaqeyno Isuroon insha Allah.
So Isuroon as an organization, some of our beliefs are that Somali women and girls are strong and resilient. We believe that they deserve to be happy and to have a strong voice. We also believe that with the Somali community's resources, Somali women and girls can overcome language barriers, intolerance, and isolation, and that they and their families can become advocates for their own physical, social, and financial wellness. Isuroon, the name for our organization, is from a Somali word that means a woman who cares for herself.
insanahay Isuroon in haweenka iyo gabdhahu inaan adagnahay inay maaragtay dad oo aan ogoleyn markaas cadaadiska lagu cadaadinayo ama wax xun haddii la soo gaarsiiyo iska celin kara waxaana istaahilaan in ay happy noqdaan inay farxaan inay lahaadaan cod fiican oo magaranaysa strong ah oo ay waxay u baahan yihiin marka ay sheegi karaan haddii la siiyo waxyaabahay u baahan yihiin oo la taageero waxay kasoo maaragtay horumar bay gaarayaan insha allah language barrierka ama luqadan ku adag ama maaragtay fahanka aanay isfahmeen with caruurtooda oo kale waa laga gudbayaa insha allah haddii ay helaan waxay u baahan yihiin intoleranceka ama maaragtay in dulqaadka uu badanayo insha allah iyo waxyaabaha midabdakoorka ku saabsan oo kale isolationka waxyaabahaas oo kale waxyaabaha maaragtay haddii ay helaan familiyaashu ama hooyooyinka wax ka taageera inay fiicnaan doonaan ban anigu aaminsanahay isolationkana waxa weyan qofku inuu magaranaysa cid la joogo dadkiisana inuu ka maqnaado also waxaan jecelnahay inta badanna aan magaranaysa ka shaqeyno waxa weeyaan inaan taageerno haweenka inay iyagu ahaadaan advocates for themselves inay iyagu is taageeraan oo meel iska soo saaraan oo fiicnaadaan ama maaragtay physical ha ahaado caafimaadkooda ama social ama maaragtay dhinaca dhaqaalaha Isuroonna magaca asanba waxaa lagu aasaasayba macnihiisa waxa kelmad Soomaaliya macnaheedu waxa weeyaan haweenka nafteeda ilaalinaysa.
We are also who we serve. Isuroon grew out of the Somali community. In 2010, Fartun Wali founded Isuroon, and since then, hundreds of volunteers, donors, leaders, staff, and community members have contributed to its growth. And today, most of our staff and board are Somali or East African.
waxaan nahay dadka aan wax u qabano Soomaalida oo ka shaqeysa Isuroon iyo Afrikaan ka shaqeeya Isuroon waxay ku dadaalaan inay communityga siiyaan waxay iyagu arkaan ama ay maqlaan ama ay raadiyaan waxyaalaha oo needska ama waxyaabahay u baahan yihiin dadka maaragtay ku nool Minnesota Isuroonna waxa weeyaan waxa organization kasoo baxday communityga Fartun Wali ayaa aasaastay 2010 ilaa iyo markiina boqolaal volunteer dad oo lacag bixinaya leaders dad maaragtay community members ayaa ka shaqeeyay Isuroon inuu magaca wanaagsan inay maaragtay communityga inuu agencygan lahaado.
We also listen to the hopes and concerns of our community members through community meetings, faith-based platforms, and face-to-face conversations. We continue to be driven by community voices. And our reputation comes from helping women improve their lives.
Waxaan also dhageysanaa hopeska ama waxay dareemayaan communitygeenu ay u baahan yihiin marka maaragtay aan la kulanno community meetings hadda sanadkan lasoo dhaafay sanad iska adag buu ahaa laakiin even virtual meetingska oo dhinaca zoomka hadda ka maaragtay aan ku aragno ama aan la mid garayno waxyaalaha u baahan yihiin noo sheegaan faith-based platforms waxay ku saabsan tahay qaybta diinteena ama masaajidyo badan baa nala shaqeeya oo magaranaysa noo ah distribution center meel oo lagu bixiyo cuntooyin badan also waxaa sameynaa face-to-face conversations albaabada Isuroon mar kastaba waxay u furan tahay dadka inay u imaadaan COVID-19 xataa markuu ku dhacay Minnesota albaabada maaragtay Isuroon was open for familiyaasha inay imaadaan waxay u baahan yihiin qaataan sumcaddeena waxaan ka helnay inaan caawino haweenka inay familiyaasha inay magaranaysa la kacaan oo life fiican inay lahaadaan.
All right, so what does Isuroon do? It's maybe a better question to ask what we don't do. So in the following slides and minutes, we'll be giving an overview of the programs that we have worked on in the past few years and are working on now. So we have social services and support for children with disabilities and for their families. We have an IDA program, which is a refugee savings program that helps people save for big expenses, like maybe a car or something like that. We do educational navigation and support, so help connect families with education systems so that they can understand and work through any issues they might have there. We work on district and state policy initiatives that benefit our families. We have outreach and engagement programs, mainly in Dakota County, especially around COVID-19. We have youth mentoring programs. We offer mental health services and mental health advocacy. We also do financial literacy trainings. And then we also worked with the Minnesota COVID-19 Housing Assistance Program to provide rent relief to hundreds of families in the past few months.
marka dadka inta ugu horeysa markay ay weydiiyaan maxaa ka samaysan Isuroon waxaan ku dhahaa maxaanan sameynin in Isuroon waxyaalo badan ba Isuroon ay u qabataa community-ga waxaan ka bilaabinaa social services-ka ama qaybta maaragtay support-ka aan siino family-yaasha carruurta xanuunsanaya ama u baahan extra support-ka aan la qabanaa maaragtay waxay u baahan yihiin aan la shaqeynaa waxa kale aan sameynaa waxa weeyaan refugee support dhinaca IDA program wax la dhaho oo aan ka caawinayno dadka qaxoontiga kusoo galay inay lacag urursadaan si ay magaranaysaa dhaqaalahoodu inuu fiicnaado waxa kale aan u qabanaa waxa weeyaan dhinaca dadkoo dhan baan tana u qabanaa educational navigation ama ha ahaato caruurta yaryar ee iskuullada maaragtay iskuulla fiican loo raadinayo ama qofka weyn ee jaamacad galaya ama college galaya in aan ka caawino aan ku support garayno district and state policy initiatives waxaan ka qayb qaadanaa districtka meelaha maaragtay degmooyinka iyo stateka gobolkoo dhan policieska waxyaabaha maaragtay laga dhigayo qaanuunka in aan ogaano wuxuu yahay haddii uu u fiican yahay Soomaalida haddii kale waxaan sameynaa kale outreach and engagement programs waxaan ku dadaalnaa in program aan bixino inuu gaadho Soomaalida meeshay joogaanba waxa kale aan qabana waxa weeye youth mentoring programs ardaydeena ku jirta high schoolska iyo middle schoolska waxaan ku dadaalnaa inaan programs u sameyno siday ay isku dayan lahaayeen intooda fiican ay u fahmi lahaayeen waxyaabaha cusub waxa kale aan qabana waxa weeyaan mental health services and mental health advocacy caafimaadka ku saabsan maskaxda financial literacy training dhaqaalaha training aan u sameynaa iyo waxaan qabanaay kale Minnesota COVID-19 housing assistant waxaan ka qayb ahayn dadka caawiya inay familiyaashu inay iska bixiyaan lacagta rentka oo dowladda waxa ay maaragtay bixisay inaan easy uga dhigno inay helaan okay.
All right, so those are all programs that we provide. We also have case management services. So that's if someone comes into our office, we can help them with pretty much any of these things. With housing search or finding housing, whether that's an apartment or some kind of rapid housing like a shelter. We help with ESL or English class enrollment, with school enrollment. We help with job readiness and resume building. We can help people apply for county benefits. We also offer legal aid for different people. And then any other referrals that someone comes in with, we can pass on to other organizations to help with those.
waxyaabaha kale aan qabanana waxaa ka mid ah ugu badan case management services waxaan ka caawinaa familiyaasha markay noo imaadaan inay helaan hadday u baahan yihiin housing guri raadis ay yihiin hadday u baahan yihiin ESL enrollment qaybta maaragtay hadday doonayaan English inay bartaan school enrollment iskuullo inay galaan ama caruurtooda geliyaan oo u baahan yihiin laga caawiyo applicationka ama processka job readiness resume building maaragtay waxaan leenahay programs oo ardayda ama dadka u baahan inay wax ka bartaan siday ay u apply garayaan shaqooyin sida interview u sameeyaan resumegooda siday u sameeyaan aan ka caawino county benefit application haddii ay u baahan yihiin wax countyga inay wax ka buuxsadaan inaan ka caawino qaybtaas legal aid waxyaabaha sharciga ku saabsan iyo other referrals haddii meel kale ay wax uga baahan yihiin dan waraaqahaasan la buuxinaa waan u darnaa.
All right, we also have many leadership and civic engagement trainings. We do community organizing, we do trainings on financial literacy and economic prosperity. We have internship as well as mentorship programs. We do citizens application support, systems literacy. We do a lot of work around supporting people in navigating different systems like education, healthcare, or something else. We also work around the voting process, political advocacy, and legislature training.
waxyaalaha kale aan qabana waxa weeyaan training oo ku saabsan in bulshadu ay dhex gasho maaragtay mujtamaca qaybta maaragtay wax laysla qabanayo ama hoggaanka haddii ay dad doonayaan inay maaragtay community leaders inay ahaadaan ama hogaamiye u ahaadaan communityga marka waxyaabahan sameyn waxa weeye community organizing haddii wax dhacaan oo kale in lasoo organize garayo wax la qabto wax laga hadlo wixii dhacay financial literacy ama qaybta dhaqaalaha iyo inuu fiicnaado oo laga hadlo internshipka iyo mentorship programska training waxaan siinaa arday badan baan qaadanaa oo iskuullada jaamacadaha ku jira oo aan tababarnaa citizenshipka qaybta maaragtay application supportka sida waxaan barnaa dadka siday u caawiyaan inay marka u imaadaan clientska u baahan in loo buuxiyo maxaa la dhahaa citizenshipka ama baasboorka in laga caawiyo waxaan barnaa ardayda iyo dadka u baahan inay maaragtay training qaataan system literacy wax la dhaho maraykan wax kastaba system uu ku socdaa marka dadkan nala shaqeynaya ama volunteer ha ahaadaan ama staff ha ahaadaan ama interns ha ahaadaan waxaan barnaa sida system literacyga laga shaqeeyo iyo voting processka sida maaragtay codaynta processkeeda dadka in la diiwaan geliyo political advocacyga siyaasadda inuu qofku advocate ku ahaado ama legislator training lawska oo ku saabsan Minnesota oo saameynaya Soomaalida sida maaragtay looga caawin karo.
All right, we also have a food pantry and supplies. Isuroon started with a food shelf, and we continue to provide halal food to families, especially through the COVID-19 pandemic. That involves dry goods necessities, healthy produce, and also diapers.
waxyaalaha kale aan bixino waxaa ka mid ah dry goodska ama cuntooyinka qalalan iyo khudradda oo healthiga caafimaadka u fiican diapersna waan bixinaa intii COVID-19 ku jirayna waxyaabahaas waan bixinaynay marka oo family hadday family u baahan yihiin marka waaweyn oo iman karaan insha Allah.
All right, so before we move on to the rest of the conference, we also just want to give a brief overview of our new office in Burnsville. So that's where I work. So if you come in, it might be me that you're seeing. So our newest Isuroon office opened in Burnsville in September 2020. We have here a food shelf. We have support for parents and families of children with autism through support groups, comfort bags for kids, and other resources. We do outreach here around COVID-19, health and wellness, and how to stay safe and healthy during the pandemic. We also do case management and social service referrals, like what we talked about before, as well as systems navigation support. And soon we'll be having mental and behavioral health services from Burnsville. You can find us on Burnsville Parkway, right off of 35W. Our address is 1103 Burnsville Parkway. We're in Suite 203. You can also give us a call or an email on the information on this slide.
intaana u gudbin waxyaabaha kale aan ka sameyn doono insha Allah ama ka hadli doono parent conference-kan waxaan rabnaa inaan ii sheegno xafiiskan cusub aan ka furnay Burnsville waxaan furnay September bishii 9aad last year waxyaabaha aan ka qayb aan ka shaqeynano waxaa ka mid ah food shelf waxaan cuntooyin baan bixinaa once a month u golnahay familiga inuu imaadaan oo qaataan cunto waxaan siinaa support familyyaasha oo caruurta maaragtay autism kale ama disabilityga in general outreach waxaan try garaynaa waxyaabaha maaragtay ku saabsan COVID-19-ka healthka caafimaadka inaan gaarsiino familiyaasha intaan gaarsiin karno iyo case management anything oo case management ku saabsan oo dadku u baahan yihiin inay xareeyaan ama buuxiyaan ama diraan inaan ka caawino system navigation support sida familiyaasha ay u heli karaan systemska ay u baahan yihiin supportka ka heli karaan in aan gaarsiino iyo mental health and behavioral health servicesna waxa weeyaan wax aan ku dadaalino inay qoysaska Soomaalida inay helaan so office-kan wuxuu ku yaalaa Burnsville Parkway in Burnsville right off of 35W so dadka Burnsville jooga ama Dakota County inta badan way garanayaan meesha ku yaalo maaragtay in downtown-ka Burnsville so downtown-ka u dhownahay numberkeena uu ku yaalaa marka haddaad timaadaan insha Allah waxaa ka shaqaynaysaa Lydia waana arki doontaan biidnillah hadda noogu timaadaan xafiiska waan ku soo dhaweynanaa waa mahadsantiin thank you السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته مرة من مكتبة وينيا أنا كنا نصر سليمان يا وحنا قصة دويننا وحنا دهوا family assessment self assessment وحوين session قربنا إن لو داجو سؤاله family جا أما parents كا أي سويدين كران سيدا ما أركتي أي أفهمان هدي أي وحي سماني إنه يهي وح صحة أما أي أباهيهن إنه وح كبدلان مركا وحا كمد وحا سمي assessment كان هورتا University of Princeton وحا لدى هذا UMatter wellness self assessment سؤال دودنا أيجا سمي أيجا دياري وحي يجو وجدًا سؤال ذا إن دياريان وحويان wellness كمركز ليه wellness أما عافيمات كمركز طبعا كمحنا حنون يقفكو إنه عافيماده مركز طبعا wellness كإنه قفكو إسكا يعني إسكا في عناضو أيافي عن مركز طبعا إنه ما ركتي راديو وانا lifelong process meaning that nolosha dodon buu qaadanaya process kan ama shaqada ka shaqeynaysid wellness kaaga marka waxaa la rabaa inaad noolaatid life oo balance leh oo ma aragtay wax kastaba qiimihiisa aad siinaysid adiguna aad fiicnaanaysid aad ama ha ahaado physical jidhkaaga ama ha ahaado spiritual diintaada ama ha ahaado maskaxdaada ama ha ahaado emotional يعني قيبة بدن بوليه مركا قيبهاس سؤال بدن بله أي ما أركتي وكتيرا UMatter wellness كان self assessment كا لكن أنا كو سؤال خاص أيان ما أركتي كتشوز كراني أو Somalida أما قيسس كصوماليات أما parents كصوماليات ما أركتي more important أو أي كفائدة سنكران مركا واحد markaad ka jawaabtid this maxaa la dhahaa assessmentigan ama qiimeyntan waxay ku jirtaa internetka haddaa google garaysid UMatter wellness self assessment waa helaysaa documentig oo dhan waad mari kartaa waad answer garayn kartaa and then markaasaad ogaanaysaa pointya ayaad maaragtay isiinaysaa then hadhowtaad ogaanaysaa markaa meeshaad maaragtay aad taagan tahay dhinacyada ka mid ah wellnesska so you have to answer questions kodan wellness kan assessment kan ku saabsan and then numberadaad eegaysa then markaasaad ogaanaysaa waxaa ku xiga marka dambena waxyaabo kale oo important ah we can go to the next step.
I'm going to ask questions in English because I don't speak Somali, and then Nasra will respond to them in Somali so you all can understand a little bit better. So our first question or statement to think about is I find it easy to express my emotions in positive, constructive ways.
Marka qaybta ugu horeysa waa qaybta emotionka ama dareenka qofku uu dareemayo marka statementiga ugu horeeya ama waxa weeyaan I find it easy to express my emotions in positive constructive ways waxaan helaa inay igu fududahay in aan soo saaro sida dareemayo si oo positive ah oo fiican oo maaragtay wax ka bedelaysa si wanaagsan oo maaragtay dhisaysa dareenka ama dhisaysa maxaa la dhahaa nolosheeda wax wanaagsan ugu maaragtay kusoo celinaysa marka adiga isweydiinaya su'aaladan sidan anigu u soo saaro emotionkayga markan guriga joogo caruurtaydu aan ku xanaaqo ama markan dabadda joogo aan la shaqaynayo qof sidan u soo saaraa dareenkayga ma si saxa baan u soo saaraa mise qofkii waan ku xanaaqaa or magaranaysaa wan dagaalamaa or si saxa baan u soo saaraayo si maaragtay constructive ah ama wax wanaagsan ka maaragtay kasoo natiijo ka keenaya ayaan u soo saaraa emotionskayga. Okay, we can go to the next one.
All right, so the second question you can ask yourself is, do I recognize when I'm stressed and take steps to manage my stress through exercise, quiet time, meditation, etc.?
سؤالك labaad ee Lydia noo sheegtay waxa weeyaan miyaan ogaada markan anigu aan stress leeyahay ama markuu stress igu dhaco miyaan garanaya miyaan qaataana tallaabooyin aan maaragtay ku yareeyo stresskayga sida maaragtay inaan exercise garayo ama inaan ciyaaro gymka ama inaan waqti qaato oo quiet ah ama aanay waxba maaragtay buuq iyo qaylo inaan ka fogaado iyo meditationka annaka waxaan u qaadanaa salaadaada miyaad tukataa miyaad maaragtay ilaaha miyaad baridaa miyaad dikirtaa yacni dikriga ilaahayna uu fiican yahay qofka inuu ku dejiyo so miyaad garanaysaa markaad stress ku jirtid su-aashaas waa inaa isweydiisaa because haddaad wixii ogaatid then cilaajkiisa raadinaysaa laakiin haddaanad ogayn inaad stress tahay then waxaad u malaynaysaa lifekaaga inuu saasun iska yahay noloshana inay saa iska tahay laakiin actually stress baa ku hayaa. Okay, we can go to the next one.
All right, so now we're going to move on to a couple of questions about environmental wellness. And the first of those is that I recognize the impact of my actions on my environment, whether that's the natural or the social world.
qaybtii sida wax u dareemsa waan ka gudubnay hadda waxaan u gudubnay qaybta environmentiga ama waxyaabaha oo agaarkaaga ah ama gurigaaga ha ahaado ama dabadda ama shaqada so waxyaabaha maaragtay kugu hareersan oo environmentigaaga ka mid ah miyaad garanaysaa sida maaragtay ay kugu affect garanayaan ama sida maaragtay wax ku saameyn marka wuxuu ku weydiinayaa su-aashan ama statementingan waxay ku sheegaysaa I recognize the impact waan garanayaa actionkan anigu aan bixiyo sida waxyaabaha agaarkayga siduu magaranaysaa u affect garanaya ama wax u saameynayo so for example oo kale waxaad ka soo qaadi kartaa waxyaabaha oo environmentigaaga u affect garanaya gurigaaga oo kale haddaad maanta action aad samaysid oo for example adigoo stress ah caruurtaada aad ku bilowdid oo dishid aad ku qaylisid marka uu affect garanaya environmentiga guriga mar kastaba guri dagaal badan buu ahaanaya qaylo badan guri degan ma ahaanayo caruurta si wanaagsan ugu kori karto. Okay.
Our second question about the environment that we're in is, do I surround myself with people who support me in my journey of being healthy and well?
su-aashan waa very important especially meeshan joogno waayo de waxaan joognaa qurbe inta badanna dadkeenana jecel magaranaysa garanaya ilaa markan yareen ilaa markan weynaanayna mana la joogaan so sometimesna hooyooyinkan iyo waalidkeenana lama joogaan marka waxay ku xidhan tahay qofka saaxibkaaga ama qofka friendka ama qofka family memberska oo qof haddaa aragtid positive ah oo wax wanaagsan ku faraya oo wax wanaagsan ku baraya ama wax wanaagsan ku hagaya ama diin ha ahaado ama cilmi ha ahaado ama maaragtay yacni wax noloshaada wax ka bedelayo si wanaagsan wax ka bedelaya haddaa isku xidhid then maaragtay wax wanaagsan baa kasoo natiijad ka imanaya marka waa inaad su-aasha adigu waa inaad isweydiisaa meel haddaad doonaysid ku qor inta dad adigu aad maaragtay surroundingkaaga dadka maaragtay family friendskaaga miyay ku support garanayaan mise waa dad aad dareemaysid in mar kastaba aad la joogtid you have to inaad proof garaysid ama soo saartid inaad adigu tahay qof wanaagsan and are they making you well healthy like ina maganaysa qof caafimaadkaaga maaragtay ku fiicnaysiinaya camal okay we can go to the next one.
All right, so this section is what the Princeton assessment calls intellectual wellness, or related to your mind or thinking. And the first question is, do I search for learning opportunities and stimulating mental activities? And we could add here other ways to learn new things.
runtiina anigu qaybta maaragtay tacliinta waan jecelahay whatever tacliintaas oo ahaado khasab maaha inaad iskuulle u gashi tacliinta laakiin qofku inuu wax barto wax cusub inuu barto mar kastaba xirfad wanaagsan inuu barto inuu maskaxdiisa ka shaqaysiiyo waa very important marka isweydiin miyaad raadisaa meel aad wax ka baran kartid whatever that is even hadduu yahay xataa inay hooyadu ay barato siday wax u tolato inay barato siday wax cunto fiican inay karsato inay barato siday maaragtay gaadhiga inay sida u wado barato anything oo tacliin ku jirto miyaad raadisaa isweydiin naftaada. Okay, we can go to the next one.
All right, the next one is, do I manage my time well rather than it managing me?
su-aasha maaragtay ka dambeysa waxa weeyaan anigu miyan maaragtay manage garaya ama macnaha yacni miyan qaybiyaa waqtigeyga si wanaagsan mise waqtigeyga isaga aniga ay qaybsada oo aniga isisiiya maaragtay waqtiga maalinta miyay ii xisaabsan tahay waxaan sameynayo waqtiyadan sameynayo waxay faa'iidadan waxaan u sameynayo mise waxa weeyaan waan iska socdaayo maaragtay yacni waxba maaragtay kama faa'iido waqtigeyguna wuu dhammaanaya waxbana kama faa'iidayo ama maaragtay telefoon qofka iisoo diran 4 saacadood la hadlaya ama 5 saacadood oo yacni ama guri baan joogaa maanta dhan waan qof baan maaragtay booqanaya macnaha waxa waqtigaaga miyaad hagaajisaa sidii laga rabay inuu ahaado waana garanaynaa waqtigan inuu maaragtay diinteenu ay rabto si saxa inaad u isticmaashid because daqiiqada tegaysa ma soo noqonayso mar dambe so very important one. Okay.
All right, this next question is related to occupational wellness or wellness related to your job. And there are many more questions, good questions, in the wellness assessment online if you look that up. But the one we have today is my workload manageable?
waxyaabaha kale ma garanaysaa caafimaadka ku saabsan su'aalo badan ayaa maaragtay assessmentigan uu leeyahay waana su'aalo muhiima su'aalo fiican oo ma garanaysaa yacni qiimo badan siinaya qofka haddii uu si wanaagsan u fahmo oo wax ma garanaysaa rabo inuu ka faa'iidaysto su'aashan waxa weeyaan my workload is manageable yacni shaqada aan anigu qabanayo waa shaqo anigu aan qaban karo oo aan manage garan karo oo aan ma garanaysaa awoodeyda ma garanaysaa iyo shaqadu way isleeyihiin yacni ma qaadanayo shaqo aniga awoodeyda ka badan waxyaalahaas waxay keenaan qofku inuu maaragtay jirkiisa inuu ma garanaysaa aanu qaadan kareen marka xanuuno badan bay keentaa waxa kale keenta waxa weeyaan stress badan qofkii uu maaragtay stress baa uga iman kara ama maaragtay xanuuno badan oo maskaxiyan ah dhinaca hadduu isku badiyo shaqada. Okay.
All right, we're moving on to physical wellness. And the first question is that there is, I eat a balanced diet, fruits, vegetables, low to moderate fat, and whole grains.
hadda waxaan u gudubnay dhinaca caafimaadka jidhka marka waxaa fiican qofku inuu isweydiiyo miyaan cunaa cunto oo maaragtay qaybaheedu ay sax tahay sida maaragtay fruitka khudradda maaragtay fat wax ku yar yahay iyo maaragtay qamandida wuxuu ku jiro so it's good qofku inuu isweydiiyo su'aaladaas oo caafimaadkiisa ku saabsan.
All right, and the second one there is I get regular physical exams. So this could be I have an annual health exam and I go to the doctor when I have symptoms.
su-aashan markaa ku xigta waxa weeyaan wax aan inta badan dadkeena waaweyn aanan sameynin waxa weeyaan sanad kastaba waxa fiican qofku inuu physical exam inuu aado oo isbaadho oo even haddaanu lahayn haddaanu xataa xanuunsanayn ama dhibaato aanay yani caafimaadkiisa aanay maaragtay aanu lahayn dhibaato ku lahayn still waa inuu tagaa dhakhtarka waa inuu isbaadhaa because maaragtay waxyaaba badan bad garan kartaa early haddaad garatid ku fiican oo caafimaadkaaga u fiican.
All right, so here we have a couple questions about social wellness or relational wellness. The first one is, do I feel supported and respected in my close relationships?
su-aashan hadda ku xigta waxa weeyaan su-aal ku saabsan socialka ama maaragtay bulshada uu ku jiro ama socialka uu ku jiro marka su-aasha waxa weeyaan I feel supported and respected in my close relationship macnaha waxa weeyaan waxaan dareemayaa in dadka aniga igu dhow inay support isiinayaan. Okay.
And the second one here, I participate in a wide variety of social activities and find opportunities to form new relationships.
waxa ku xigta dhinaca qaybta socialka waxa weeyaan waxaan ka qayb qaataa dhinacyo kala maaragtay kala duwan iyo activities kala duwan ama maaragtay waxyaalo kala duwan oo marka su-aasha ku xigta waxa weeyaan I participate yani waxaan ka qayb qaataa maaragtay fursado kala different ah inaan activities iyo waxaas in la sameeyo maaragtay laga qayb qaato waxyaabaha oo maaragtay communitygeena uu maaragtay uu leeyahay si aan u sameeyo relationship cusub dad inaan barto garto social qof social inaan ahaado.
All right. And then finally, this is a section with questions on spiritual wellness. The first one of those is, do I take time to think about what's important in life? This could be who I am, what I value, where I fit in, and where I'm going.
qaybtan waxay ka mid tahay qaybta spiritualka ama maaragtay anaka inta badan diinteena ayay ku saabsan tahay marka waqti miyaan qaataa aan ka fakaro maxaa muhiima dunidan maxaa maaragtay yaan ahay waxay qiimahan leeyahay meesha maaragtay wuxuu ilaahay ii abuurtay waxay xagan tegayaa xagan maaragtay ka socdaa marka su'aalaha qofku inuu isweydiiyo way fiican tahay siduu wax wanaagsan u sameeyo noloshiisa iyo nolosha dadkana inuu maaragtay qayb fiican ka qaato. Okay.
Next, are my values true priorities in my life and are they reflected in my actions?
su-aasha ku xigta waxa weeyaan qiimooyinka anigu aan leeyahay miyaan siiyaa priority miyaan horeysiiyaa lifekayga miyaan ka dhigaa wax muhiima miyay maaragtay noloshayda sidan maaragtay actionkan bixinayana miyay ka qayb qaataan valueskan anigu dareemayo for example haddaan dhahno valuega oo kale honestyga ama qofku inuu qof run inuu sheego markastaba oo ilaahay dartiisa runta u sheego actionkaaga waa inaad maaragtay valuegaas yes waad dareemaysa inuu important yahay muhiim yahay laakiin you have to actionkaagana waa inuu raacaa valuegaaga iyo actionkaaga waa inay israacaa.
All right, and finally, there's this statement. I feel connected to something larger than myself, whether that be God, nature, connectedness of all things, humanity, community, or something else.
qofku maaragtay su-aashan waxa weeyaan waxaan dareemayaa inaan ku xidhanahay wax aniga iga weyn marka anagu dee waxaan ku xidhanahay ilaahay alxamdulilah dad kale maaragtay dadka qaar baa natureka iyo waxaas aaminsan laakiin qofku inuu ilaahay ku xidhnaado alsona inuu diintiisa iyo qur'aankiisa iyo cibaadadiisa inuu markastaba ku xidhnaado macnaha taas priority ma siisaayo ma ku xidhan tahay markastaba mise maya.
All right, that is the last question we have. Thank you for joining us and for thinking about these questions for yourself. Feel free to look up the assessment online. And hopefully this gave you some things to think about as we move into the rest of the sessions for today, to think about how you want to move forward with your family and your parenting.
waa mahadsantihiin su'aaladaas intaasan inga maaragtay soo qaadnay oo maaragtay la wadaagnay waxaan doonayaa inaan in sheego markaa qaadataan su'aaladan markaa isweydiisaan ama haddaa qaadataan assessmentiga oo online-ka waxaa isweydiisaan waxyaabo qaar sida anigu maanta maxaan ahay baritana maxaan doonayaa inaan noqdo maxaa motivation isiinaya inaan isbedelo iyo action planna samaysta marka very important weeyaan qofku inuu isweydiiyo su'aaladaas su'aalo muhiim weeyaan inaad dareentid aad garatid meesha taagan tahay markaas iyo waxaad doonaysid inaad noqotid insha allah marka waxaan rajaynaynaa inuu magaranaysaa inaa faa'iido inuu insiiyey sessionkan insha allah waa mahadsantihiin inaad ka qayb qaadateen thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Richard Wexler. I'm Executive Director of the National Coalition for Child Protection Reform. The last time I spoke to a conference like this was in early March of last year. It was the last time I traveled anywhere in 2020. As you may be able to tell, it was also the last time I had a haircut, which is why for most of this presentation, I'm going to put myself up in the upper right-hand corner and show you slides. I am pleased that at least my most recent memory of travel was such an inspiring event. Thank you for inviting me back, even if we have to do it differently this time. In just the time since I was last with you, the whole world learned a lesson about the abuses inflicted on people of color by police. Minneapolis was at the center of it all. I mention this because it's so important to understand that what Hennepin County and other Minnesota counties call Child Protection Services also is a police force. A better term for them would be the family police. In fact, they have even more power than the police. A police officer can throw your son up against the wall and frisk him. A Child Protection Services worker can come into your home, strip search your child, and walk out with him. That doesn't mean that this is what they will do every time or even most of the time. Child Protection Services likes to portray itself as a benevolent helping agency that will provide the services you need to help keep your family together. Sometimes that is true. Some caseworkers are wise enough and caring enough to do the right thing. They might see that there is no problem in your home, or they might see that there is a problem rooted in poverty, such as poor housing or no one to watch your children while you work, and they may help you to get better housing or childcare. The problem is, you have no way of knowing what kind of caseworker will come to the door. What happens to your child will depend on who that caseworker is, what pressures are on her, how many other cases she has to deal with, and even whether or not the worker is under pressure because a child abuse death is getting a lot of attention in local media. That's why it is so important to think of Child Protection Services as the family police. What does everyone say to do when you face an investigation by the police? Call a lawyer. When confronted by the family police, the best thing to do is the same. Call a lawyer. Other speakers can tell you who to call, when to make that call, and who else in addition to a lawyer you can call for support. I can only emphasize the importance of not going through this alone. Now, I am told that sometimes parents are so ashamed of having their children taken away that they don't tell anyone. But you have nothing to be ashamed of. The people who should feel shame are the people who took away your children. The people who should feel shame are the people who built this system of family policing, the people who run it now, and the people who refuse to change it. They have plenty of reason to be ashamed. The entire American child welfare system was built on a foundation not of benevolence, but of bigotry. In particular, fear and hatred of immigrants. It was largely the creation of Charles Loring Brace, a Protestant minister in New York City, who had seen the revolutions of Europe in 1848. He was terrified that, quote, the outcast, vicious, reckless multitude of New York boys might attempt a similar uprising. He hated and feared New York's immigrants, most of them Catholics, in much the way too many Americans fear Muslim immigrants today. He called Catholic immigrants the scum and refuse of ill-formed civilizations. Brace deemed the parents genetically inferior, but nevertheless felt the children could be saved if only they could be taken from those parents and shipped off to farms in the South and Midwest. So between 1854 and 1929, more than 100,000 children were taken this way on so-called orphan trains. Some were orphans, many were not. Some were well treated in this first version of foster care, many were not. It was shameful then. That a system permeated with racism is maintained today is even more shameful. Unfortunately, Minnesota is among the worst offenders. Minnesota takes away children at a rate double the national average and more than 2.5 times the rate of states that have been national leaders in using safe, proven programs to keep families together. Only 6 states take proportionately more children than Minnesota when the number of children taken is compared to the number of impoverished children in each state. And this is nothing new. Minnesota has been an extreme outlier for about as long as anyone has been collecting data. In fact, the earliest state-by-state survey I know goes back to 1985. Minnesota was an extreme outlier then, too. As you can see, there are some early signs of improvement. In 2018 and 2019, Minnesota took away fewer children than the year before. But what is progress in Minnesota still is an obscene rate of removal in much of the rest of the country. So either Minnesota is a cesspool of depravity with vastly more child abuse than most of America, or Minnesota is taking away far too many children. The excuse for giving the family police such massive police power is the claim that it's necessary to stand up for children's rights. They tell us they're just erring on the side of the child. I doubt that there is another phrase in child welfare that has done more harm to children than erring on the side of the child. When children are screaming in a detention center on the Mexican border or a foster home in Minnesota because they never needed to be taken away, don't know where their parents are, and don't know if they'll ever see them again, how is that erring on the side of the child? When massive studies tell us over and over again that in typical cases, children left in their own homes typically fare better even than comparably maltreated children placed in foster care, how is placing them in foster care erring on the side of the child? The harm occurs even when the foster home is a good one. The majority are. But there is far more abuse in foster care than in the general population, and far more than generally realized. The official numbers on this are garbage. That's because official numbers involve agencies investigating themselves. That's why academic research consistently produces much higher rates of abuse in foster care. And bad as those outcomes are for family foster homes, the record of group homes and institutions is worse. If a child is taken from a safe home only to be beaten, raped, or killed in foster care, how is that erring on the side of the child? But even that isn't the worst of it. While workers are interrogating families over poverty, something else isn't getting done. A visit by a caseworker to check out a hotline call is delayed, or it doesn't happen at all. The extra phone call isn't made. A child in foster care is not seen, so a child in real danger is missed. The take the child and run approach makes all children less safe. It is those who perpetuate this approach who should be ashamed. The overall rate of child removal in Minnesota is bad enough. It gets even worse when you examine the state's record for racial bias. In Minnesota, for example, Black and mixed-race children are in foster care at more than double the rate of white children. Now, the standard excuse from those in denial about racial bias is itself revealing. For decades, foster care apologists insisted that they never took children because of poverty. But confront them about racial bias and they say, we don't take all those children of color because of their race, it's because they're poor. The research makes clear that it is both. Most telling is what happens when caseworkers are given hypothetical situations and asked to evaluate the risk to the child. The scenarios are identical, except for the race of the family. The workers said the child was at greater risk when the family was described as Black. There are also plenty of examples involving other families of color. Today, a Native American child in Minnesota is 21 times more likely to be in foster care than a white child, the worst disparity in America. So congratulations, Minnesota. In other areas, you are merely among the worst in the nation. When it comes to using child welfare as a cudgel against Native American communities, you're number one. Now, when we think of child abuse, we think of the horror stories, the children who are beaten, tortured, and murdered. These are among the worst imaginable horrors, and even one such case is too many. Fortunately, they also are extremely rare. Investigations of child abuse begin when somebody calls a child abuse hotline. But nationwide, out of every 100 calls to hotlines, 91 are so clearly false that they either are screened out by the hotline or found to be false by the family police themselves. Now, let's turn to the calls deemed by the family police to be true. And that requires no proof, by the way, just a worker checking a box on a form. 6 of those 100 calls are deemed to be true cases of neglect. Now, sometimes neglect cases can be extremely serious. Deliberately locking a child in a closet and starving him is neglect. But so is simply running out of food because the SNAP benefits weren't enough to stretch for a month. What do you think happens more often? The very definition of neglect in most state laws is a definition of poverty. In Minnesota, neglect is pretty much anything and everything. The Minnesota definition includes failure by a person responsible for the child's care to supply a child with necessary food, clothing, shelter, health, medical, or other care required for the child's physical or mental health when reasonably able to do so. Failure to protect a child from conditions or actions that seriously endanger the child's physical or mental health when reasonably able to do so. Failure to provide necessary supervision or childcare arrangements appropriate for a child. There is hardly an impoverished child in Minnesota who at some point would not be considered neglected using these absurd definitions. So of course the Minnesota Family Police confuse poverty with neglect. It's inevitable. Now that leaves 3 out of 100 calls. They represent sexual abuse and all forms of physical abuse, from allegedly excessive corporal punishment to torture. So out of every 100 hotline calls, at most 3 fit the image that comes to mind when we hear the words child abuse. But decades of reading about the horror stories and sometimes deliberate efforts by some in the advocacy community to mislead us in the name of raising awareness have created a new danger. COVID-19 may become the latest excuse to needlessly investigate families and take away children. For decades, we've been conditioned to believe that the horror stories are typical, and that all that stands between children and evil parents out to torture them is the equivalent of a thin blue line of professionals, such as teachers and doctors, who are required to report any suspicion of child abuse to the family police. Now, add COVID-19 to the mix. What emerges is a false, racist narrative that goes like this. now that fewer of those mostly white, middle-class, mandated reporters have their eyes constantly on overwhelmingly poor, disproportionately non-white children, it is claimed that their parents supposedly will unleash upon their children a pandemic of child abuse. Yes, the pandemic is putting more stress on everyone. But why do we rush to assume that for poor people in general, and poor Black people and Native people in particular, the only way they'll cope with it is to beat up their children? The myth continues to spread, even after news organizations such as the Associated Press, the Marshall Project, and Bloomberg City Lab, and child welfare scholars have challenged it. But in some states, it has led to things like teachers calling in reports on families just because children don't have the technology they need to get online for classes. And it risks creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Teachers themselves are being told over and over and over that there is now a hidden pandemic of child abuse going on. So when children return to in-person learning, teachers may jump to conclusions. They may be even more likely to assume that a bruise caused by an accident is child abuse. They may be even more likely to see a hungry child and call Child Protection Services instead of calling a food bank. Now, how might we fix all this? Well, there are a series of recommendations on our website, nccpr.org, but I'm just going to highlight a few of them here. On the issue of racial bias, one good place to start would be to adopt a practice pioneered in New York City known as blind removal meetings. Before workers can remove a child, they have to present the facts to a committee, but they must leave out information that gives away the race or the income status of the family. That simple step led to a significant reduction in removals of Black children. Another vital step would be to turn Child Protection Services into child poverty services. Now, that doesn't mean you have to wipe out poverty to eliminate child abuse and neglect, but you can drastically reduce what agencies label neglect and the stresses that may lead to abuse by simply ameliorating the worst effects of poverty. Indeed, given the extent to which many in child welfare still deny that the problem is poverty, it's remarkable how often the solution is money. One study found that if you raise the minimum wage by $1 an hour, you cut the rate of what agencies call neglect by 10%. Another study found that increasing the earned income tax credit by $1,000 per year cuts the likelihood of Child Protection Services involvement by 7 to 10%. Another study found that increasing income by only $100 per year reduces the likelihood of a child maltreatment report by 2 percentage points. And this one should come as no surprise. A massive study found that when homeless families received housing vouchers, the rate at which they lost children to foster care was cut by half. But one part of the study was surprising. That study also found that when the housing vouchers were accompanied by inflicting social work on families, the results were not nearly as good. The families needed more cash and less social work. It also would be useful if Minnesota decision makers would finally swallow their collective pride and start looking at places that do child welfare better, which in fact is most places. It's been 20 years since I first suggested that Minnesota look at the successful child welfare reforms in Alabama. Since then, journalists from newspapers ranging from the Springfield, Missouri News Leader to the Arizona Daily Star to the New York Times did take a look. They found that thanks to a lawsuit consent decree, Alabama had indeed done an impressive job of reducing foster care, and independent court-appointed monitors found it was done with no compromise of child safety. A member of my group's volunteer board of directors was co-counsel for plaintiffs in that lawsuit. But the most important single change any child welfare system can make is to simply level the playing field. In other words, provide high-quality defense counsel for families. In New York City, for example, most families get a defense team, a lawyer with a reasonable caseload, a social worker, and sometimes a parent advocate, someone who has been through the system herself. And no, that's not to get bad parents off. It's so that the team can do what family policing agencies should do, but often don't. Provide alternatives to cookie-cutter service plans that rarely address families' real needs and can actually make things worse. A major study found that this approach reduces foster care with no compromise of safety. Even the city's Child Protection Services Agency supports it. As for the costs, it probably saves money by reducing foster care, and in many cases, the federal government will now pay half the costs. How can such change be achieved? By banding together with other groups that work with African American and Native American communities to change state laws and state policies. And after consulting with a lawyer to see if it's safe, by speaking up about what the family police have done to you. In 2020, a revolution began when people of color spoke up about what the police do to them. That revolution began in Minneapolis. Another revolution can begin if families in Minnesota join together and join with families across the country to condemn what the family police are doing to their children. Thank you very much.
So for this section, we are going to focus on movements and breath work that actually help us focus. Sometimes when we're feeling really anxious or depressed, our brain is just everywhere but in the present moment. So allowing ourselves with specific breathing techniques that can help focus and movement and rest, we can find that we can shift ourselves pretty quickly. So what we know is we can travel in our brain. We all know this. Our brain can have many, many stories, and it impacts our body. And our body too can have different positions like this, which impact our thoughts. So when we work with our mind, body, and heart, it can be really helpful. So the movements we're going to do today are just standing, which looks really basic in an upward mountain, but letting our body feel really awake. And you can see it says, "I'm awake." We're going to influence a little bit with our affirming language. Then we're going to use a movement called tree, which is I am focused. And when you feel off balance, I'm telling you, in your life, mentally, physically, emotionally, allowing your body to come into a balance pose can be super helpful. And then we're going to stand right back in mountain, allowing ourselves to just be ready for the day. So are you ready to start with breathing again? Here we go. So for breathing exercises, again, we want our body to feel grounded. So I like to have both feet on the floor, whatever's comfortable for you, seated, standing. And we're going to just take our hand up and we're going to do what's called hand tracing. I love hand tracing for focusing because it is touching the body, but it helps us count. So we're just going to notice right now where you're at and how you feel right now. And then hand comes here and we'll just take a few breaths. Ready? Breathe in to the top of the thumb and out. Breathe in and out. Again. Nice, and we just notice how we feel. So sometimes we want to be more discreet with our breathing, but we really want to stay focused. So I love placing my hand just on my leg. It can be under the desk or wherever, so no one needs to see that I'm doing my breathing. But again, I'm tracing it to keep my mind and body together. So we'll just take 5 more breaths. Ready? Take a breath in and out. Breathe in and out. Slowly in nice. And then you just notice, you feel more focused and present. So the present moment is called the present because it's a gift. It allows us to be right here, right now, and just noticing what's on our surface. So we're going to set an intention, and an intention is just a feeling or attitude, how you want to show up. So just take a moment right now for this little break to think how you want to show up the rest of the day. So I want to be present and focused. So as I move into the movements, I want to really think about my intention is I am present, I am focused. So let's do some movement. So I'm going to have you stand up if you'd like, and just place both feet on the floor or on the ground, and turn the palms up just for a moment. So this represents really a body that's open and ready. If we weren't, we'd be like this, all right? So just get the shoulders back if you'd like, stand up nice and tall, and maybe say to yourself, I'm ready. And then we're gonna lift our arms up and gaze up, keep the neck long, stretch out your spine, and then release down. Let's try that again. Super simple moves. It also can be done in the chair. Breathing in here, feel the feet grounded. Keeping the feet really connected, just lift up, palms face each other, lift up your heart. I can do this. And then slowly release down. Now we're going to do that balancing pose. A lot of people say, I can't balance, but that's why we do balancing, to learn how to balance. So we find our eyes, here's the trick, your eyes need to focus on one thing that's not moving. I'm going to spread my toes out in my shoe, but not grip them, just relax. And then I just kickstand my foot. Now it goes above or below the knees. So you can go like this, but if you're really wiggly, you want to keep it down or grab a chair. And we're just going to hug to the midline. Hands can be right here. And we'll just take a few breaths, maybe saying to yourself your intention, like I am focused or I am present. Soften your eyes. We get really serious in balancing, so just allow yourself to enjoy. Fall out if you need to, who cares? It's about you coming back in. That's the most important. And then we can bring our arms up if you want. Our gaze can be up or we keep it down where we feel steady. Slow breaths in and out. And then when you're ready, release the arms and release the legs, and just notice if you feel more focused. So I always say, did you get like 5 seconds where you didn't have to think about your to-do list? Like, that's golden. So shake out your legs. We'll go to the other side. Find your eyes on one thing. Toes pointed straight ahead. Just kickstand your foot and take a few breaths here, or bring your foot above or below your knee. And then come back to your words. So I am focused, or I am present, brave or strong. Maybe play around with the arms. And you'll notice my legs are wiggling because my body's looking for balance. So I'm going to say that again. Your internal state wants you to be in a state of balance and joy. So it's going to find that in your body, and we train our brain to find that too. And I'll slowly release. Now we'll just stand back in that mountain pose and notice how we feel, stepping into your strength and bravery. It takes a lot of courage to be human. And breathe here. Excellent. Now shake that out. Now the next thing we're going to do is from EM Yoga. So it is called the wake up routine, and I love to do this throughout the day. So what you're going to do is we're going to tap on different areas. So your body communicates all the time to you. It communicates when you're feeling a soreness, there's like a throbbing or an ache. We feel pain in our body. So our body has a way to communicate, and the tapping actually starts to connect your mind and body together. So you're going to find your collarbones right here, and then we're going to just find the soft spot right below. So all we're going to do is you can massage it or tap it or even go off the surface. And we're just going to inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth. So this is just kind of the spot that you wake up your body. Take a breath in, exhale. Excellent. One more time. Shake it out. Now we tap the thymus right here, and this is super important for your immunity. So we want to take a nice deep breath in, exhale out. You can do this throughout the day. Breathe in, Exhale. One more time. Shake that out. Excellent. The next point is your spleen points. Your spleen digests emotional, physical, mental experiences. And again, sometimes this is really tender. You can massage it or tap it or go on the surface. Breathe in. Exhale out. Again, breathe in and out. One more time. Shake it out. Now the next point is right here, and this is to help us ground. So tapping right underneath the eyes. Take a nice deep breath in. Exhale out. 2 more. Exhale. 1 more time. Shake it out, and then just stop and notice. Notice how the body feels. Let the body start to communicate to your mind. Now shake it out. Now the next thing we're going to do is you're going to take your right hand, tap your right leg and left. So this is pretty easy. This is called homolateral, and it's kind of when we're stuck. We're actually like in this robotic state. So we don't want to stay there too long. So shake that out. All right, and what we're going to do is called the cross crawl. And the cross crawl is so important for organizing your brain. So you're going to take and cross against the other side, all right? It's kind of clunky in the beginning. You're going to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And just notice if you can get in rhythm. This really helps us get organized. It can be done anytime throughout the day. Let's do a few more. Excellent, and then shake that out. So now we're going to get really centered. Take your hands in front of the body, and we're going to just open up and take a nice deep breath up and stretch out your shoulders and exhale. Let's do that again. Breath in, exhale. 1 more time. We're going to do a little modification here. You're just going to take your hands to the top of your head and just ground your body. We're going to come back to that position and take a few breaths here. And then release. So you can notice, again, you can hear in my voice right now, for my body in this moment, that really helped ground me. Sometimes it wakes you up if you feel tired. So the last thing we're going to do is rest. So we've done a little breathing, we've done a little movement, and now we're just going to rest. And for this rest, we're just going to place our hand, if you'd like, on your head. And you can place your other hand here if you want, or you could place your hand here. So I like to just kind of play around, like, does it feel good right now to do this? Or place my hand right here, and we're just gonna take a few breaths because we wanna stay focused, so we don't wanna go too long in our rest. So go ahead and take a few breaths here. And gently release the hands, shake them out, take a nice breath in and a nice breath out, and just decide how you want to show up today. And if your mind moves to a place you don't want to be, you notice that, and then we come back using breathing and movement and rest. Have a great day.
And being into a Somali community, being born in America, being a Somalian, is I get to have a stronger bond with my family, my friends, and the huge Somali community.
Okay, what about you, Fahad?
What's being a Somali American is that I have a large group of family, and and we could celebrate we could celebrate Ramadan and Eid, and we go all together as a family, and that's what it means.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Sophia, and I'm very proud to be a Somalian. It's because we're a very strong community, loving community, and caring community. Assalamualaikum. My name is Sehra, and I'm happy to be a Somalian because there's strong community, helpful community, and a loving community, and there's close families, and they're all nice, and they're big.